The lawyer read the will twice, like even he didn't believe it. "To my granddaughter, Wren," he said, adjusting his glasses like the paper might change if he looked at it again. "I leave the cottage at Widow's Point, along with its contents, in full." That was it. That was my inheritance. A cottage. Nobody had opened in 10 years. Sitting on a cliff at the edge of Millhaven. Paint peeling, roof half caved from the last hurricane. Meanwhile, my sister Claire got the house on Birchwood Lane, the family furniture business, and access to an account with more zeros in it than I'd ever seen in my life. I sat there in my black dress, the one I'd bought 2 days earlier, because grief doesn't wait for you to own the right clothes, and I felt 30 pairs of eyes swing toward me. Aunts. Cousins. Neighbors who'd shown up for the free lunch after. All of them doing the math out loud in their heads. The good granddaughter got everything, and the architect, the one who never visited enough, the one who moved 4 hours away for her career, got a shack. Claire didn't even try to hide her satisfaction. She reached over and squeezed my hand like she was comforting me. "It's okay, Wren," she whispered, loud enough for the row behind us to hear. Grandma probably just didn't know what else to do with it. I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe my grandmother, Ruth Calloway, a woman who'd once kept the town's shipping ledgers in her head faster than the actual ledger, had simply run out of ideas when it came to me. But some small, stubborn part of me, the part that had spent every summer of my childhood at that cottage, learning to read tide charts on her kitchen table, refused to believe Ruth Calloway ever did anything without a reason. I didn't say any of that out loud. I just nodded, took the folder with the deed, and let the lawyer's office empty out around me. 3 days before I was supposed to sign the paperwork accepting the cottage, 3 days before the estate closed for good, and whatever was inside that house became either mine to understand or mine to lose forever, I drove out to Widow's Point. The town of Millhaven hadn't changed much. Same salt-bleached storefronts, same gulls fighting over dropped clamshells outside the diner. But the cottage looked worse than I remembered. Shutters hanging by one hinge. A porch step rotted clean through. The kind of house that made people cross the street a little, like bad luck might be catching. I stood at the gate for a long moment before I made myself walk up. Inside, it smelled like salt and dust and something older. Paper, maybe, or the particular must of a house that has been closed up and left to keep its own secrets. Dust sheets covered the furniture like sleeping ghosts. My grandmother's reading chair sat by the window, angled toward the water, the way it always had, as if she might walk back in any minute and pick up exactly where she left off. I wasn't there to be sentimental. I was there because Claire had already hired an appraiser to help me figure out what to do with the place, which really meant she wanted a number so she could offer to buy it off me for less than it was worth and tear it down for the view. And some part of me, the part that had learned tide charts at that kitchen table, wanted to understand what my grandmother had actually left me before anyone else got the chance to decide its worth for her. I started in the kitchen because that's where Ruth Calloway had lived her whole life, really. Feet planted on that worn floor, hands always doing something useful. I ran my palm along the counter edge, the way she used to when she was thinking. And that's when I felt it. A give in the stone beneath the window ledge. Not much. Just enough that a hand that had touched that ledge 1,000 times as a child would notice what a stranger's never would. I pressed harder. The stone shifted, then slid, revealing a narrow cavity behind it, dry, lined with an old dish towel, and inside, a leather journal, its cover soft with age, and a small stack of letters tied with kitchen twine. My hands were shaking before I even opened it, like some part of me already knew this house had been waiting 10 years for someone to finally ask it the right question. If you've ever stood in a room that used to belong to someone you loved and felt like the walls were about to tell you something you weren't ready to hear, stay with me, because this story only gets heavier from here. My grandmother used to say the sea keeps its secrets until the tide is good and ready to give them up. Turns out, so did she. If you want to hear where hers led, subscribe. I've got more stories like this waiting for you. I sat down right there on the kitchen floor, dust sheet be damned, and I opened the journal to the first page. March, 22 years ago. Claire took money from the register again today. Third time this month. She thinks I don't notice, or she thinks I'll cover for her because Robert's business is struggling, and she's ashamed to ask outright. I love that girl more than my own life, but I am starting to understand something about her that frightens me. She believes she deserves things rather than earning them. I don't know where that came from. Perhaps from me, spoiling her because she was the sick one as a baby, the one we almost lost. I gave her softness when I should have given her spine. I stopped breathing for a second. Claire, at 17, stealing from our grandmother's shop. I had never heard a word of this. Not from Claire. Not from anyone. I kept reading, entry after entry, spanning years, my grandmother's careful, slanted handwriting tracking not just Claire's small thefts as a teenager, but something that grew slowly into a pattern that made my stomach turn. A loan from the family furniture business that was never repaid, a signature on a supplier contract that Claire had forged in our grandmother's name to secure inventory credit she wasn't authorized to use, an affair Claire had, one Ruth found out about and never told Robert, because she didn't want to break her granddaughter's marriage before Claire had the chance to fix it herself. My grandmother had known everything for years, and she had said nothing to any of us. Then I found the entry from 18 months before she died. I have decided how to leave things, and I know it will look cruel to anyone who doesn't understand why. Claire will inherit the house and the business because she needs the anchor of responsibility, needs finally to be trusted with something and have to prove she deserves it in the open, where I can no longer quietly cover for her. If I leave her nothing, she'll spiral, and I cannot do that to her, not after everything. But I will not leave the business unprotected either. I have restructured the ownership so that any transfer or sale of the business requires a co-signature from Wren. Wren doesn't know this yet. She will find the cottage strange, small, insulting even, compared to what her sister receives. But the cottage holds the truth, and truth, in my experience, is worth more than any account balance. I am leaving Wren the one thing Claire cannot touch, cannot inherit, cannot spend: the facts. If Claire tries to sell the business, dissolve it, or strip its assets, she will need Wren's signature to do it. And Wren, once she reads this, will finally understand why. I am not choosing between my granddaughters. I am trying one last time to save them both. I read that page 4 times. The cottage wasn't a lesser inheritance, it was the leash. My grandmother hadn't miscalculated, hadn't run out of ideas, hadn't loved me less. She had built a legal safeguard into her estate and hidden the proof of why inside the one property Claire would never think twice about. Because Claire, like everyone else, assumed the cottage was worthless. She hadn't left me the smaller share. She had left me the last thing standing between her granddaughter's business and her granddaughter's worst habits. I didn't confront Claire right away. I sat with it for 2 days because I needed to be certain I understood what I was holding before I said anything that couldn't be unsaid. I called the lawyer, who confirmed carefully that yes, the co-signature clause was real, buried in an amendment Ruth had filed 18 months before her death. And yes, I had every legal right to see the business's full financial records now that I held that authority. What I found there matched the diary almost exactly. Claire had already, in the 10 weeks since the funeral, begun quietly shopping the business to a regional furniture chain. An offer that would have gutted the staff sold off Ruth's original workshop equipment for scrap and handed Claire a payout large enough to disappear her debts and then some. She hadn't told Robert. She hadn't told me. She'd been 3 signatures away from closing it when the buyer's lawyer discovered the co-ownership clause and the deal stalled. That's when Claire finally called me, furious, demanding to know why some outdated clerical error was blocking her sale. I drove to Birchwood Lane that evening. Claire opened the door already talking, already building her case before I'd said a word. How the business was a burden, how Grandma would have wanted her to be free of it, how I was punishing her out of jealousy for a share I never even wanted. I let her finish. Then I put the journal on her kitchen table, opened to the page about the register, and watched her face change. She knew, I said, about all of it. The register, the forged contract, Robert's business loan, the affair with, stop. Claire's voice cracked. She sat down hard, like her legs had simply decided not to hold her anymore. She never said anything, not once. I thought. She stopped, pressed her fingers against her eyes. I thought she didn't know. She knew everything, I said. And my own voice wasn't steady either. She just never stopped believing you could be better than your worst decisions. That's why she gave you the house and the business, Claire. Not because she trusted you blindly, because she wanted to give you the chance to prove her right. And she gave me the cottage, I said, so that if you couldn't, there'd still be something left to save. Claire cried for a long time that night, not performative tears, the real kind, the kind that come out ugly and unguarded. She told me about the debts Robert didn't fully know about how the affair had ended 2 years ago, and she'd never forgiven herself, about how easy it had been, every single time, to tell herself Grandma would understand. We didn't fix everything at that kitchen table. Some things take longer than one conversation, and I'm not going to pretend Claire and I walked out of that night as different people than we walked in. But we agreed together to withdraw the sale. She started slowly paying back what she'd taken over the years, not because a court forced her to, but because for the first time she wanted to be someone our grandmother's faith in her had actually been earned by, not just given to. I still own the cottage at Widow's Point. I fixed the porch step myself the summer after, sanding it down the way Ruth taught me when I was 9 and thought I'd never need to know how. I kept her reading chair angled toward the water, exactly where she left it. Some nights I sit in it and think about how close I came to believing the story everyone else was telling at that will reading, that I'd been the afterthought, the granddaughter who got the leftovers because she hadn't shown up enough. It would have been so easy to let that resentment calcify into something permanent. Claire certainly would have let me, but my grandmother knew something the rest of us didn't have the patience to learn. Sometimes the smallest inheritance is the one doing the most work. Sometimes the person who seems to be given the least has actually been trusted with the most important thing of all. I don't know if Claire and I will ever be as close as we were before all this, but we talk now, really talk, not the surface-level pleasantries we'd settled into over the years. And every time I sit in that cottage, looking out at the water the way my grandmother used to, I understand a little more of what she was trying to tell me in her careful, slanted handwriting. In the one room in the family she knew none of us would think to look. She wasn't choosing between us. She was trying, one last time, to save us both, and in her own quiet way, sitting in a cottage nobody else wanted. I think she finally did.